Welcome back to Hollywood Unveiled, where we pull back the velvet curtain on the lives, the legends, and the sheer unadulterated drama of Tinseltown's most iconic figures. Tonight, we delve into the whirlwind world of a woman who wasn't just a star. She was a supernova, an exotic force of nature who crashed onto the Hollywood scene and redefined what it meant to be a leading lady. The Dark Queen steps into the light. Before there were it girls, glued to their smartphones, or reality stars documenting every breakfast smoothie, there was a true queen of drama, a tempest from Europe who shook Hollywood right down to its glittery foundations. Her name, Pola Negri, sounds like an expensive perfume or maybe a Bond villainess, right? And guess what? She was kind of both, wrapped up in one unforgettable package. Forget subtle glances. Pola didn't just enter a room, she conquered it probably, trailed by a cloud of expensive French scent and the shattered egos of lesser mortals. We're not just talking about a silent film actress here. Pola Negri was a phenomenon. Picture this, smoldering, coal-rimmed eyes that could pierce your soul right through the silver screen. Seriously, it looked like she applied eyeliner with a Sharpie, and it worked. Add to that the rakishly tilted turbans that became her signature, toenails painted a shocking shade of red, and an overall "don't mess with me" vibe that had studio heads both utterly captivated and, let's be honest, slightly terrified. She radiated an exotic allure mixed with a fierce, almost feral intensity that audiences hadn't seen before. Was she Polish, Russian, Hungarian? Who cared? She was Pola, and that was enough. But Pola wasn't just about the look. She had the talent to back it up, a raw, emotional power that leapt off the screen, even without a spoken word. Yet her off-screen life? Honey, it was even more dramatic than her most heart-wrenching roles. People whispered that her laughter could shatter champagne glasses, and her temper tantrums could silence an entire film set faster than a director yelling, "Cut!" She collected headlines like other women collected hats, scandalous affairs, fiery rivalries, aristocratic marriages, and one very, very public display of grief that cemented her reputation forever. Remember Rudolph Valentino, the Latin lover himself. Pola's performance at his funeral practically redefined the term drama queen decades before it became standard internet slang. She didn't just mourn, she put on a show, complete with fainting spells and enough black roses to make a florist weep with joy. So who was the woman behind the heavy makeup, the fabulous furs, and the whirlwind of publicity? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's the story of Barbara Apollonia Chałupiec, a girl from impoverished Poland who meticulously crafted herself into Pola Negri, a legend forged in ambition and sheer willpower. It's a tale of constant transformation, of rising from nothing, conquering continents, facing down scandals, and refusing to be forgotten. So grab your popcorn, maybe pour yourself something strong, because Hollywood Unveiled is about to pull. You back the curtain on Pola Negri's journey of the endless self-invention. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single scene. What do you think was Pola's most dramatic moment, on or off screen? Let us know in the comments below. From Polish dust to staged dreams. All right, let's rewind the tape way back. Before the Hollywood premieres and the passionate embraces with screen idols, there was just a little girl born into a world far removed from the Klieg lights. Our future. Screen siren entered the world as Barbara Apollonia Chałupiec. Go ahead, try saying that 3 times fast after a couple of martinis. She was born on January 3rd, probably 1897, though Pola herself was always a bit flexible with her birth year. Depending on her mood or maybe the interviewer, it could drift anywhere between 1894 and 1899. Was this an early sign of her flair for self-mythology? You betcha. The first act in her lifelong play of self-invention, perhaps? Her birthplace was Lipno, a small town in Poland which, at the time, was actually part of the Russian Empire. Let's be real, Lipno's main claim to fame today is probably just being the place where Pola Negri first drew breath. It wasn't exactly glamorous. Think less Hollywood Boulevard, more, well, provincial Poland at the turn of the 20th century. Her family background was a mix of hardship and, intriguingly, a touch of faded grandeur. Her father, Jerzy Chałpiec, was a tinsmith or perhaps a skilled craftsman, originally from Slovakia. Now here's where the family drama kicks in early. Jerzy wasn't just fixing pots and pans. He was involved in revolutionary activities against the Russian Tsarist regime. This landed him in hot water, big time. He was arrested by the Russian authorities and exiled to the icy wasteland of Siberia when Pola was just a little girl. Poof, father figure gone. Talk about a dramatic start in life. You can almost picture little Barbara watching him being taken away, those soon-to-be famous dark eyes already storing away the intensity of the moment. This left her mother, Eleonora Kiełczewska, to pick up the pieces. Eleonora came from a background of minor Polish nobility, but whatever status or wealth the family once had was long gone. She was a single mother raising her only child in Warsaw, scraping by in what sounds like pretty dire poverty. Imagine the sheer grit it took. Eleonora must have been a force of nature in her own right, a quiet superwoman juggling survival and trying to provide some semblance of normalcy for her daughter in a cramped apartment likely smaller than Pola's future Hollywood dressing rooms. Pola later wrote about her mother's resilience with deep affection, painting a picture of a proud woman determined to maintain dignity despite their circumstances. Pola herself was quoted saying, "My mother taught me always to hold my head high, even when my pockets were empty. Solid advice for anyone, but especially handy if you're planning on becoming a global superstar known for your regal bearing, don't you think?" So what did little Barbara look like back then? Probably not the vamp we'd come to know. Accounts suggest a skinny, perhaps slightly awkward kid, but with those arresting large, dark eyes that seemed too big for her face. Picture a small, Polish waif, maybe bundled up against the cold Warsaw winter, but instead of innocent wonder, her eyes held a glint of fierce determination, maybe even a hint of the grand plans already brewing inside that young head. She wasn't just observing the world, she seemed to be assessing it, figuring out her angle. The seeds of Pola Negri, the self-created icon, were being sown in the tough soil of occupied Poland, nurtured by a strong mother and shadowed by the absence of a father lost to political turmoil. It's the classic underdog story, the kind Hollywood loves, only this one was terrifyingly real. The stage was set, not with velvet curtains, but with the harsh realities of survival. Broken ballet dreams and a new calling. Growing up in Warsaw, even amidst the poverty, young Barbara wasn't just focused on survival. She had dreams, big ones. And her first love wasn't the flickering images on a screen, but the disciplined grace of the dance. She was talented enough, or perhaps just determined enough to get accepted into the prestigious Imperial Ballet School in Warsaw. Can you picture it? Little Barbara, trading the harsh streets for the polished floors of the ballet studio, captivated by the music, the movement, the sheer theatricality of it all. She wasn't dreaming of being a princess waiting for a prince. She dreamed of being the prima ballerina, spinning under the bright lights, commanding the stage with every precise plie and arabesque. The discipline, the focus, the ability to convey emotion without words. It was all training, though she didn't know it yet, for a different kind of performance art. She poured her heart and soul into ballet. It was her escape, her passion, her imagined pathway out of the constraints of her life. She likely envisioned a future filled with applause, tutus, and international acclaim. But then, destiny, that notorious party pooper, decided to throw a wrench in the works, or maybe a whole toolbox, Accounts vary. Some say it was a bout of tuberculosis, a serious lung disease that was sadly common back then. Others suggest a training injury. Whatever the specific cause, the result was devastating. Her health was compromised, and the rigorous demands of professional ballet were suddenly out of reach. Boom! Just like that, the dream shattered. Can you imagine the heartbreak? Years of dedication, discipline, and dreams gone in an instant. For many, that would have been the end of the story, a descent into bitterness or resignation. But this wasn't just anyone. This was Barbara Apollonia Szaupieck, the future Pola Negri. Was she crushed? Undoubtedly. Did she sit around weeping into her borscht? Probably not for long. Because if there's one thing that defined her entire life, it was her ability to pivot, to reinvent, to take a catastrophe and somehow turn it into a launching pad. As she supposedly said later, reflecting on life's challenges, suffering, if it does not diminish character, develops it. So the ballet shoes were hung up, perhaps with a few dramatic tears shed for effect. But instead of giving up on the stage altogether, she found a new avenue for her dramatic instincts: acting. She enrolled in the Warsaw Imperial Academy of Dramatic Arts. And guess what? It turned out she was ridiculously good at it, maybe even better than she was at ballet. It turned out that acting could be just as theatrical, just as demanding, and allowed for an even broader range of expression. Plus no-point shoes required, Pola had found her new stage, a place where she could channel all that pent-up passion, intensity, and yes, probably a good dose of personal drama into creating characters. This whole episode is really the first major chapter in Pola's saga of the endless self-invention. When one door slammed shut with cruel finality, she didn't just pound on it futilely, she kicked down a different door, a bigger, grander, potentially more lucrative one, leading to the world of theatre. The fire hadn't been extinguished, it had just been redirected. One of her acting teachers reportedly noted her raw potential, saying she possessed a demonic talent. Another apparently remarked she had fire inside her. Well, buckle up, folks, because that fire was about to ignite stages across Warsaw, and eventually set Hollywood ablaze. The ballerina was gone, the actress was being born. Warsaw, the first big stage. Growing up in Warsaw at the turn of the 20th century wasn't just about personal struggles, it was about living in a city with its own complex identity. Warsaw, despite being under Russian rule as part of Congress, Poland, was a vibrant cultural hub, the beating heart of Polish arts and aspirations. Imagine a city that felt both ancient and electric, a place where history hung heavy in the air, but where theatres, cafes and salons buzzed with artistic energy and nationalist fervour. Art wasn't just entertainment, it was a form of resistance, a way to keep the Polish spirit alive under occupation. Growing up breathing that air, how could you not develop a flair for the dramatic, a desire to be seen and heard? This environment undoubtedly shaped young Barbara. She saw firsthand how performance could captivate, influence, and transport people away from their everyday worries. The theatres were temples, the actors high priests and priestesses. The contrast between the city's cultural richness and the often stark reality of life for many, including her own family, must have been incredibly stark. On one side, the muddy streets, the political tension, the struggle for basic necessities. On the other, the dazzling lights of the theatre, the applause, the illusion of glamour and escape. It's no wonder Pola gravitated so strongly towards the latter. She didn't just want to watch the show, she wanted to be the show. The social climate also played a role. Living under foreign rule often breeds a strong sense of identity and a certain defiance. Did this contribute to Pola's famously independent, sometimes rebellious spirit? It's hard to imagine it didn't. She wasn't just fighting personal battles, she was a product of a nation fighting for its soul. This might explain some of her legendary stubbornness, and her refusal to be easily categorized or controlled later in her career. She carried a piece of that Polish resilience that "don't tread on me" attitude with her wherever she went. As she might have put it, perhaps with a dramatic sigh, "We Poles, we are forged in fire, darling." Even in her early years before fame and fortune transformed her wardrobe, hints of her future style might have emerged. Perhaps she learned early on how to make a statement with limited resources, altering hand-me-downs or finding a unique way to tie a scarf. That innate sense of theatricality probably extended to how she presented herself, even off stage. You can almost picture her experimenting, discovering the power of a well-placed accessory or a striking pose. This resourcefulness, this ability to create an effect, to make do and make it fabulous, would certainly serve her well when she hit Hollywood and had access to Paramount's entire wardrobe department. Necessity, after all, is the mother of invention, and self-invention was Pola's specialty. Warsaw wasn't just her hometown, it was her first real audience, her first training ground in the art of capturing attention. It was where Barbara Chaupiek started consciously, or perhaps unconsciously, sketching the outlines of the persona that would become Pola Negri. The city taught her about drama, resilience, the power of performance, and perhaps the importance of always leaving them wanting more. The lessons learned on the streets and stages of Warsaw were the foundation upon which she would build her empire. The curtain was about to rise on her professional career, and Pola was more than ready for her cue. From Warsaw to Berlin. So Barbara, soon to be Pola, graduates from the Warsaw Imperial Academy of Dramatic Arts, armed with that demonic talent her teachers saw. And let me tell you, she didn't waste any time warming the bench. She burst onto the Warsaw stage scene like a firecracker. Forget slowly climbing the ladder. Pola practically pole vaulted onto center stage. She quickly became the talk of the town, dazzling audiences with her intensity and her non-traditional, emotionally charged performances. It was like, 1 minute she's reciting lines in class, the next she's the toast of Warsaw's theatre district, probably already demanding the best dressing room. But the stage, even the prestigious Warsaw stage, wasn't big enough to contain her. Ambition, the flickering world of moving pictures, was calling. Poland had a nascent film industry, and Pola, never one to miss an opportunity, jumped right in. Her film debut came relatively early, and she made a significant mark in 1914 with Niewolnika's Misłów. This is a crucial film because it's one of the earliest Polish feature films, and one of Pola's first starring roles that still survives today. It already showcased some of her trademark smoldering intensity. She wasn't playing shrinking violets, folks. Even then, she gravitated towards roles with passion, danger, and a hint of the forbidden. Her talent didn't go unnoticed. She worked with prominent Polish directors like Ryszard Ordyński, further honing her craft and building her reputation. But the real game changer, the connection that would slingshot her onto the international stage, was meeting Ernst Lubitsch. Lubitsch, a brilliant comedic actor turned even more brilliant director, recognized Pola's unique star quality. They were an unlikely pair in some ways, his sophisticated wit, her raw passion, but creatively they clicked. Around 1917, opportunity knocked louder, and this time it had a German accent. Pola received an invitation from the legendary theatre director, Max Reinhardt, to come work at his prestigious Deutsches Theater in Berlin. Now Berlin in the late 1910s and early 1920s. Forget Paris, this was the epicenter of European arts and cinema. It was edgy, experimental, decadent. Think Weimar Republic cabaret vibes meet serious artistic ambition. It was like Hollywood before. Hollywood got its own zip code. And Pola, sensing the bigger stage, packed her bags and headed west. Can you imagine the culture shock? Or maybe she just felt right at home amidst the creative chaos. As Pola might have dramatically declared, "Warsaw was the rehearsal, Berlin is the premiere." In Berlin, her career went into overdrive. She transitioned fully into film, signing with the powerful UFA, Germany's biggest and most influential studio, and who was also at UFA ready to collaborate, her old pal, Ernst Lubitsch. Together, they created a series of films that not only cemented Pola's stardom in Germany, but also made waves internationally. They started with exotic, melodramatic fare like Die Augen der Mumie Ma, 1918, where Pola played, you guessed it, a seductive temple dancer caught in a tragic love triangle. Classic Pola. Then came Carmen 1918, another role perfectly suited to her fiery persona. She wasn't just playing these parts, she inhabited them, bringing a level of sensual intensity that German audiences, and soon the world, found irresistible. But the absolute knockout punch, the film that blew the doors off and put Pola Negri squarely on Hollywood's radar, was Madame du Barry 1919. Directed by Lubitsch, this historical spectacle starred Pola as the infamous mistress of King Louis XV. It was lavish, scandalous, and utterly dominated by Pola's captivating performance. The film was a massive hit in Europe. When it was eventually released in the United States under the title Passion, it caused a sensation. American audiences, used to the more wholesome charms of Mary Pickford, were stunned and fascinated by this exotic, overtly sexual European star. Passion wasn't just a movie, it was an event. It proved foreign films could be blockbusters in America and created an insatiable appetite for its star. Pola Negri, the girl from Lipno, had conquered Europe. Hollywood was next on her list. During this German period, Pola truly solidified the persona that would make her famous. Her acting style was still rooted in silent film technique, expressive eyes, dramatic gestures, conveying everything through face and body. But hers wasn't subtle, it was operatic, larger than life. She combined raw sensuality with a dangerous edge. She wasn't the girl next door. She was the mysterious woman from a faraway land who could ruin your life and make you thank her for it. This was the birth of the Pola Negri brand, the dark, exotic femme fatale. Lubitsch, known for his sophisticated touch, knew exactly how to frame her magnetism. He once supposedly remarked, directing Pola was like trying to control a force of nature, but what a magnificent force. They were creating cinematic magic, and the shockwaves were felt all the way across the Atlantic. Paramount Pictures was watching, and they were reaching for their checkbook. The Berlin premiere was a smash hit. The next act was set in Hollywood. The Hollywood invasion. So Passion hits America like a ton of bricks, or maybe like a ton of exquisitely costumed European drama. Hollywood, always sniffing around for the next big thing, basically trips over itself trying to get Pola Negri onto a boat heading west. It was Paramount Pictures, one of the major studios, that won the bidding war. In 1922, they signed Pola to a lucrative contract, making her one of the very first major European stars to be deliberately imported to conquer the American market. Gloria Swanson was Paramount's reigning queen, but they wanted more exotic spice, and Pola was practically overflowing with it. Hollywood back then was like a kid in a candy store with a blank check, and Pola was the most dazzling, mysterious, probably slightly dangerous-looking bonbon imported directly from Berlin. You can almost hear the studio execs buzzing, "Get me, that Polish dynamite." Her arrival in America was hyped like the second coming, only with more furs and better eyeliner. Paramount's publicity machine went into hyperdrive, billing her as this enigmatic, sophisticated European temptress. They splashed her image everywhere, the dark eyes, the dramatic poses, maybe a hint of scandal whispered in the captions. Her Hollywood debut film was Belladonna 1923. The title alone tells you everything, right? Beautiful woman, but with that hint of Italian danger. She played an exotic, manipulative woman who ensnares a hapless Englishman in Egypt. Sound familiar? Paramount wasn't exactly stretching her range initially. They were giving the public exactly what they thought they wanted: Pola the vamp unleashed on American soil. The film did well, fueled by the massive pre-release buzz. Pola Negri had officially landed. Move over, apple pie. There's a new, much spicier dish in town. She followed up with a string of films designed to capitalize on her exotic image. The Spanish Dancer, 1923, saw her, predictably, as a fiery Spanish dancer, sensing a theme here. But hey, it worked. Audiences loved her passionate energy. However, the real artistic reunion, and arguably one of her Hollywood career highlights, came in 1924 when she teamed up again with Ernst Lubitsch, who had also made the leap to Hollywood. Their film was Forbidden Paradise. This time, Pola wasn't just some generic exotic temptress. She was Catherine the Great, the powerful Empress of Russia. Now, Forbidden Paradise is worth pausing on. Let's call this our iconic focus for a moment. It perfectly captured the magic of the Pola-Lubitsch pairing. Lubitsch brought his signature, sophisticated wit and subtle satire, while Pola delivered a performance that was regal, commanding, seductive, and surprisingly funny. She wasn't just chewing the scenery, she was portraying a complex ruler, a woman, wielding immense power in a man's world, navigating court intrigue and romantic entanglements with undeniable charisma. The film itself was a sly commentary on power and desire, wrapped in a visually stunning package. Pola, as Catherine, draped in jewels and furs, holding court, manipulating her lovers and ministers. This was the ultimate embodiment of her endless self-invention on screen. She was royalty, self-created perhaps, but utterly convincing. Forbidden Paradise was a critical and commercial success, showcasing both Pola's star power and Lubitsch's directorial genius on American soil. It remains one of their most celebrated collaborations. Pola continued to be a major box office draw throughout the mid-1920s. She proved she could do more than just play vamps. In Hotel Imperial, 1927, directed by Moritz Stiller, she gave a highly acclaimed performance as a hotel chambermaid caught up in wartime espionage. Critics praised her depth and subtlety. This wasn't just Pola the exotic, this was Pola the actress. She also starred in Barbed Wire 1927, a World War I drama where she played a French farm girl who falls for a German prisoner of war. These roles showed a different side of her, proving her versatility beyond the femme fatale archetype she was often assigned. Of course, being a top star in Hollywood meant navigating a world of big egos, studio politics, and rivalries. Pola worked with major directors and co-starred alongside leading men like Adolphe Menjou and Rod LaRocque. Stories about her on-set demands and fiery temperament became legendary. Was she difficult? Probably. Was she demanding? Almost certainly. But she knew her worth and fought for her place in the studio hierarchy. And then there were the rivalries, whispered about in gossip columns. The most famous alleged feud was with fellow Paramount queen, Gloria Swanson. Both were known for their glamour, their dramatic flair, and their impressive wardrobes. One can only imagine the icy glares exchanged across the studio commissary. A gossip columnist of the time quipped, "Walking onto a Paramount set when Negri and Swanson are both filming is like entering a beautifully decorated war zone." Whether fact or fiction, it all added to the Pola mystique. Culturally, Pola's impact was huge. She offered a stark contrast to the prevailing image of American femininity embodied by stars like Mary Pickford or the wholesome Gish sisters. Pola was dark, dangerous, overtly sexual, and unapologetically foreign. She brought a European sophistication, or at least Hollywood's idea of European sophistication, to the screen. She made exoticism chic. She fascinated audiences, particularly women, who were perhaps tiring of the sweet virginal heroines and drawn to Pola's portrayal of female power and desire, however destructive it sometimes seemed. As one critic wrote, perhaps slightly breathlessly, Pola Negri doesn't just act, she smoulders. She makes sin look devastatingly attractive. She wasn't just a movie star, she was a cultural import who fundamentally changed the landscape of Hollywood. Glamour. The invasion was successful. Pola Negri was reigning supreme. But in Hollywood, reigns can be notoriously short-lived, and a new technological revolution was lurking just around the corner. Sound arrives, does the voice depart? Just when Pola was sitting pretty atop the Hollywood heap, draped in Paramount's finest furs and basking in the glow of superstardom, along came a little thing called sound. Dun, dun, dun. The Jazz Singer. Premiered in 1927, and suddenly movies could talk. For many silent stars, this wasn't just a technological shift, it was an earthquake that threatened to swallow their careers whole. And Pola Negri, unfortunately, was standing right near the epicenter. The biggest hurdle? Her voice. For years, audiences had projected their own imagined voices onto Pola's silent image, probably something husky, mysterious, dripping with continental allure. The reality, however, was different. Pola spoke English, but with a thick, distinctive Polish-Germanic accent. Now, accents weren't necessarily career killers. Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich would soon prove that. But Pola's accent, combined perhaps with a voice quality that wasn't conventionally melodious to American ears at the time, became a major perceived liability. Hot take, movies can talk. Even hotter take for Pola, maybe yours shouldn't? Ouch. Her transition to talkies was rocky, to say the least. Her Paramount contract eventually ended, and she struggled to find footing in the new sound era. She made a few talking pictures, like A Woman Commands 1932 for RKO Pictures. The title sounds promising, very on-brand for Pola, right? But the film wasn't a huge success. Critics and audiences who had adored her silent performances seemed unsure what to make of her spoken dialogue. That magnetic, larger-than-life presence that worked so well in silence sometimes felt, well, a bit much when paired with her heavily accented speech in roles that often required a more naturalistic style. Hollywood, that notoriously fickle beast, started to cool on its imported queen. The whispers began, can she handle dialogue? Is the accent too thick? Suddenly, the very thing that made her exotic and intriguing in silence, her foreignness, became a potential drawback. Talk about a cruel twist of fate, adding fuel to the fire with the persistent rumors about her temperament, stories of clashes. With directors, demands for star treatment and epic temper tantrums had always circulated, part of her dramatic persona. But when her box office appeal started to wane, these stories shifted from amusing diva antics to liabilities. Studios became less willing to put up with perceived difficulties from a star whose drawing power was uncertain in the talkie era. The competition was also heating up. New stars were rising and established rivals were adapting. The Hollywood landscape was changing rapidly, and Pola seemed to be struggling to keep pace. You can almost picture a frustrated studio head sighing. Dealing with Pola used to be worth the box office receipts. Now, maybe not so much. It's a tough town, folks. 1 minute you're the toast, the next you're, well, just toast. And we can't talk about challenges without circling back to that infamous event, the Rudolph Valentino funeral in 1926. While this happened before the sound crisis truly hit, the fallout lingered and definitely colored public perception of her. Valentino, the ultimate Latin lover, died suddenly and tragically, sending shockwaves through the world. Pola, who claimed they were deeply in love and possibly engaged, turned his funeral into a masterclass in public grieving. We're talking collapsing hysterically by the coffin, claiming she saw his ghost, and reportedly ordering a massive floral blanket spelling out POLA for his casket. She fainted, repeatedly. Was it genuine, heart-wrenching grief? Or was it a calculated performance by an actress who knew how to command a scene, even a funereal one? The press and public were divided. Some saw a woman consumed by sorrow, others saw shameless, opportunistic self-promotion. She quite literally stole the scene at her lover's funeral, one cynical journalist wrote. Regardless of her true feelings, the spectacle cemented her image as the ultimate drama queen, someone for whom the line between performance and reality seemed irrevocably blurred. This reputation didn't exactly help when she later faced career struggles. It made it easier for critics to dismiss her as overly theatrical or insincere. Facing diminishing opportunities in Hollywood, Pola did what she always did. She sought a new stage. In the mid-1930s, she returned to Europe, specifically to Germany. There, her accent wasn't a barrier, and she experienced a significant career resurgence. She signed again with UFA and starred in several films, most notably Mazurka, 1935. The film was a huge success in Germany and even received some positive attention abroad. It seemed like Pola had managed another incredible comeback, reinventing herself yet again. However, this comeback came at a steep price, historically speaking. This was Nazi Germany. Working within the state-controlled UFA during that period inevitably led to controversy and accusations of collaboration later on. Pola always vehemently denied being a Nazi sympathizer. She claimed she clashed with propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels and even maintained she used her influence to help some Jewish friends escape persecution. The truth, like much of Pola's life, is likely complex and layered. She was undoubtedly trying to survive professionally, perhaps naively underestimating the political implications or believing she could remain purely an artist within that toxic regime. But filming under the swastika cast a long shadow. It was another dramatic, challenging chapter in her life, forcing her to navigate treacherous waters both professionally and politically. Even when battling career setbacks, Pola remained fiercely dedicated to her craft. Preparing for a role like the one in Mazurka, she would have immersed herself completely, drawing on all those years of experience to convey emotion, a skill honed back when her eyes had to do all the talking. The fire was still there, even if the circumstances were increasingly fraught with peril. An indelible mark. So Pola Negri, her career had more ups and downs than a roller coaster designed by a sadist. But through it all, one thing remained constant: her unforgettable, inimitable style. It wasn't just about the clothes she wore or the makeup she applied. It was an entire persona, meticulously crafted and projected with unwavering confidence. Let's break down the elements that made Pola, well, Pola first. The fashion. Oh, the fashion. Pola didn't just wear clothes, she made statements. Her signature accessory, the one forever linked to her name, was the turban. She wore them tilted, at jaunty angles, crafted from luxurious fabrics, sometimes simple, sometimes adorned with jewels or feathers. Why turbans? Maybe they added to her exotic mystique. Maybe they were practical for managing hair on set. Or maybe she just liked the way they framed her dramatic face. Whatever the reason, she owned that look. Nobody rocked a turban quite like Pola. Then there were the furs. So many furs. Stoles, capes, full-length coats. She draped herself in animal pelts like it was her divinely appointed right. Add ropes of pearls, chunky bracelets. Statement. Earrings, and you get the picture. Opulent, extravagant, almost regal. She dressed like every day was her own personal coronation, and let's not forget those painted toenails, peeking out from elegant sandals, often in a shocking shade of red or another bold color. Rumor has it she pioneered this trend in America, scandalizing the pearl clutches and delighting the fashion forward. As Pola herself might have drawled, "Why be subtle when you can be fabulous, darling?" Next up, the makeup. If eyes are the windows to the soul, Pola's were framed by dramatic, heavy-lidded curtains of kohl. We're talking dark, smoky eyeshadow, thick eyeliner extending outwards, creating that intense, mysterious, almost predatory gaze that became her cinematic trademark. Paired with dramatically shaped eyebrows and often a dark Cupid's bow lip, the look was pure femme fatale. It wasn't about looking natural. It was about creating an effect, enhancing her already powerful features to project glamour and danger across the theater. Forget no makeup. Pola's look screamed high maintenance and proud of it. You could probably spot her eyeliner from the back row of the biggest movie palace, and her acting style, particularly in the silent era where she truly shone. It was as bold and dramatic as her fashion choices. She belonged to the more overtly theatrical school of silent acting. Every emotion was writ large on her face, conveyed through flashing eyes, expressive mouth movements, and grand, sweeping gestures. Subtlety wasn't really her forte in those early days. Intensity was. She could convey passion, rage, despair, or cunning with a single look or a turn of her head. While some later critics might find it overly dramatic by modern standards, it was incredibly effective for the time and perfectly suited her persona. She commanded the screen, drawing the audience into her character's emotional turmoil. Beyond her personal style, Pola's contributions to the film industry were significant. She was a true pioneer, one of the first major international stars to successfully transition to Hollywood, paving the way for other European imports like Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich, who followed shortly after. She proved that foreign talent could be a major box office draw in America. Crucially, she helped define and popularize the archetype of the femme fatale on screen. Before Pola, dangerous, seductive women certainly existed in stories, but she gave the archetype a specific, electrifying face and form in cinema. Her portrayals of exotic vamps, manipulative lovers, and powerful, morally ambiguous women resonated with audiences and influenced how female characters, particularly those outside the good girl mold, were written and portrayed for decades. And of course, her influence on fashion and beauty trends was undeniable. The turbans, the heavy eye makeup, the bold nail colors, these weren't just things Pola wore, they were trends she started. Women across America and Europe copied her look, trying to capture a bit of that exotic Negri glamour. She demonstrated the power of a movie star to shape popular culture beyond the screen itself. Pola proved you didn't need to be born in Ohio to become the queen of Hollywood. You could arrive from Poland via Berlin, accent and all, and still take the town by storm. Connecting this all back to our central theme, Pola's style wasn't just superficial dressing up. It was an integral part of her endless self-invention. Each turban, each layer of kohl, each dramatic pose was a conscious choice, part of constructing the larger-than-life persona of Pola Negri. She understood the power of image, perhaps better than anyone. Think back to her portrayal of Catherine the Great in our iconic focus, Forbidden Paradise. That role was the perfect synthesis of her style and substance, the regal costumes, the commanding presence, the blend of power and seduction. It wasn't just acting. It was Pola presenting her ultimate self-created image, powerful, alluring, and utterly in control. Her style was her substance in many ways. As she allegedly once declared, "It is not enough to be talented, one must also look the part." And oh boy, did Pola Negri always look the part. love, marriage, and more drama. If Pola Negri's career was a roller coaster, her personal life was the whole darn amusement park, thrilling, unpredictable, occasionally terrifying, and always, always headline-worthy. She approached romance with the same intensity she brought to her roles, leaving a trail of passionate affairs, tumultuous marriages, and enough gossip to keep Luella Parsons busy for decades. Let's start with the marriages. Pola officially tied the knot twice, both times to men with impressive-sounding titles, which probably appealed to her sense of drama and her self-created regal persona. First up was Count Eugeniusz Dąbski, a Polish nobleman. They married in 1919, just as her star was rising in Europe. It seems to have been a relatively brief affair, ending in divorce by 1921. Was it true love? Or was it a young, ambitious actress securing a title and perhaps some social standing? Given Pola's track record, maybe a bit of both. Bless her pragmatic heart. The marriage lasted just long enough for her to add Countess to her list of accomplishments before she fully set her sights on international stardom. Convenient. Her second marriage, in 1927, was even more high-profile and arguably more disastrous. She married Prince Serge Mandivani. Yes, Prince. He was one of the marrying Mandivanis, a trio of exiled Georgian siblings known more for their ability to snag wealthy, famous spouses than for any actual royal duties. Pola fell hard, or at least fell publicly. This marriage coincided with the tricky transition to sound and perhaps offered a sense of security or glamour during an uncertain time. However, the union was notoriously stormy. There were whispers of infidelity, financial squabbles, and plenty of dramatic fights. Imagine the arguments between the fiery Polish film star and the possibly not quite a Prince Georgian playboy. The mind boggles. They divorced in 1931, and it wasn't amicable. Pola later claimed he squandered much of her fortune. Marrying a prince might sound like a fairy tale, but for Pola it seemed closer to a financial cautionary tale wrapped in tabloid headlines. As a friend supposedly quipped, Pola thought she was marrying royalty. Turns out she just married an expensive hobby. But Pola's romantic history is perhaps best remembered for her passionate, highly publicized affairs with two of the biggest male stars of the era. First, there was Charlie Chaplin. Around 1922-1923, just as Pola was arriving. In Hollywood, she and the little tramp himself embarked on a very public romance. Talk about a power couple, the comedic genius and the dramatic European diva. What must those dates have been like? Filled with laughter, intense silences, maybe some plate throwing. They were both strong personalities, both geniuses in their own right. The press went wild, covering their every move. Was it a genuine love match or a brilliant publicity stunt engineered by two masters of self-promotion? Probably a confusing mix of both. The relationship burned brightly but briefly, eventually fizzling out. Chaplin later wrote about her with a mix of admiration and exasperation, acknowledging her magnetism but also her volatility. One contemporary observer noted dryly, "Watching Pola and Charlie together was like watching two volcanoes decide whether to erupt or just smoke menacingly. And then came Valentino, Rudolph Valentino, the chic, the ultimate Latin lover. Their romance, blossoming around 1925-1926, was the stuff of Hollywood legend. He was the brooding, impossibly handsome screen idol. She was the dark, exotic femme fatale. Together, they were cinematic dynamite, the absolute pinnacle of Hollywood glamour and passion. Their relationship was intense, public, and apparently deeply felt, at least by Pola. They were reportedly engaged or planning to be when tragedy struck. Valentino's sudden death in August 1926, at the age of 31, devastated his millions of fans and very publicly devastated Pola. Her reaction, as we know, was operatic in its grief. This relationship, ending so abruptly and tragically, became inextricably linked with Pola's image, the passionate lover, the inconsolable mourner. It was her grandest, most tragic love story, played out on the world stage. Beyond these headline-grabbing romances, Pola navigated the complex social web of Hollywood. She had friendships, working relationships, and those rumored rivalries, like the one with Gloria Swanson. Analyzing these interactions reveals facets of her personality. With Lubitsch, there seemed to be mutual respect and creative synergy. With Chaplin, a clash of powerful egos. With Valentino, perhaps a genuine, if highly dramatized, connection. With Swanson, maybe competitive sparks fueled by studio politics and shared ambition. She could be fiercely loyal to those she trusted, but also quick to anger if she felt slighted or undermined. A fellow actor once said, perhaps half-jokingly, "You always knew where you stood with Pola." Usually, it was slightly out of her spotlight. Her relationships, like her career, were rarely simple or quiet. They were bold, complicated, and always worth watching. She didn't just have relationships, she had sagas. Facing herself and the world. Beneath the glamorous facade, the furs and the headlines, Pola Negri was still Barbara Apollonia Chaupiec, a woman facing her own set of demons and navigating some incredibly turbulent waters. Life wasn't always a perfectly lit close-up. The decline of her Hollywood career in the wake of sound films wasn't just a professional setback. It undoubtedly took a significant psychological toll. Imagine being hailed as a queen, adored by millions, earning a fortune, and then suddenly facing rejection, criticism, and dwindling offers. The very accent that was once part of her exotic appeal was now deemed a flaw. The dramatic temperament that was once seen as fiery passion was now labeled difficult. That kind of public fall from grace is tough for anyone, let alone someone. With Pola's apparent pride and sensitivity, she fought tooth and nail to maintain her status, but that battle likely left internal scars. As she might have confided to a friend, "They build you up, darling, just to tear you down. It is the Hollywood way." Financial worries also plagued her at various points. While she earned enormous sums at the height of her fame, mismanagement, the costly marriage to Prince Mdivani, and the devastating Wall Street crash of 1929 likely impacted her fortune significantly. The pressure to maintain a certain lifestyle, the demands of stardom, and perhaps a lack of sound financial advice could lead even the biggest stars into precarious situations. There were periods where the woman known for dripping in jewels might have been secretly worrying about paying the bills. This adds another layer of complexity to her decision to return to work in Germany. It wasn't just about artistic opportunity. It might have been driven by sheer financial necessity, and that period in Nazi Germany remains one of the most complex and troubling chapters of her personal struggle. We touched on the professional side, but personally, it must have been fraught with anxiety and moral ambiguity. Imagine navigating the treacherous political landscape of the Third Reich as a foreign actress with Polish roots. Her claims of friction with Goebbels and helping Jewish friends might be true, attempts to rationalize her position, or a mix of both. She was trapped, in a sense, needing work, finding it in a regime she likely privately abhorred. The internal conflict, the fear, the compromises she might have felt forced to make, these are struggles we can only glimpse, hidden behind the carefully maintained public face. It was a tightrope walk over a chasm, and it left an undeniable stain on her legacy, a shadow she couldn't entirely escape. You can picture her, perhaps, trying to focus solely on her lines, on her performance, while the chilling reality of the regime swirled around the UFA studios. A battle fought not just for career survival, but perhaps for her own sense of self. As the years went by, Pola, like everyone, faced the inevitable challenges of aging in a notoriously youth-obsessed industry. After her main film career ended, she largely retreated from the public eye. How did the great Pola Negri, queen of drama and glamour, handle the transition to a quieter life? Descriptions of her in later years suggest she retained her sense of style and dignity, even as the spotlight faded. The heavy coal might have softened, the furs perhaps stayed in storage more often, but reports indicate she never lost that regal bearing, that spark in her eyes, and the hair, always impeccably coiffed or hidden beneath a stylish turban naturally. Time and tide wait for no one, not even a silent screen legend, but Pola seemed determined to face them on her own terms, maintaining her self-created image until the very end. Did she have any relatable habits or hobbies that grounded her during these struggles? It's harder to find details about the everyday Pola. She guarded her privacy more fiercely in later years. However, she did eventually write her memoirs, suggesting a need to reflect and perhaps control her own narrative one last time. Some accounts mention her love for animals, particularly dogs. Can we picture Pola, the former vamp, finding solace cuddling a beloved pet? It's a surprisingly humanizing image. Perhaps in the quiet moments, away from the demands of being Pola Negri, she found comfort in simple companionship, a quiet routine that offered respite from the relentless drama of her earlier life. Maybe even Pola Negri enjoyed a quiet cup of tea and a good book, as long as the tea set was appropriately luxurious, of course. Defining moments. Pola Negri's life wasn't just a series of films and affairs. It was punctuated by specific high-drama events that cemented her legend and perfectly illustrate her flair for the theatrical, both on and off screen. These moments weren't just things that happened to her. They were often events she actively shaped, turning personal milestones into public spectacles. Let's revisit the iconic focus event, Rudolph Valentino's funeral in 1926. We've mentioned the fainting and the drama, but let's paint a clearer picture. Picture New York City gripped by hysteria following Valentino's death from a perforated ulcer. Tens of thousands lined the streets. Inside the funeral home, amidst the chaos, Pola Negri staged her grief. Dressed head to toe in mourning black, heavily veiled, she reportedly collapsed multiple times beside his open casket. Between collapses, she'd tell reporters tearfully of their undying love and plans to marry. She sent enormous wreaths, including that infamous floral blanket spelling out her name. She claimed she had seen his spirit. She arranged for photographers to capture her profound sorrow. Was it genuine grief amplified by her dramatic nature? Almost certainly, there was real emotion there. But was it also a performance, instinctively seizing the biggest stage available? You betcha. One cynical reporter described the scene. Miss Negri's grief was palpable, particularly when the cameras were rolling. The event perfectly encapsulates Pola, raw emotion blended inextricably with masterful showmanship. It became a defining moment, forever linking her name with Valentino's and solidifying her reputation as Hollywood's reigning queen of drama. Decades later, another defining personal event was the publication of her autobiography, Memoirs of a Star, in 1970. By this time, Pola was living a much quieter life, largely retired from the public eye. The book brought her back into the spotlight, offering her version of her own incredible story, and what a version it was. Filled with dramatic retellings of her rise from poverty, her European triumphs, her Hollywood conquests, her passionate romances, and her encounters with historical figures. It was pure Pola, glamorous, self-aggrandizing, emotional, and according to many critics and historians, occasionally playing fast and loose with the facts. Dates were fudged, relationships were embellished, motives were polished. Sound familiar? This wasn't just a memoir, it was arguably her final act of the endless self-invention. Here, on the printed page, she could shape her legacy exactly as she wanted it remembered. She was the heroine, the survivor, the eternally glamorous star, recounting her triumphs and tragedies with operatic flair. How much of it was strictly accurate? Does it even matter? The book was entertaining, it brought Pola back into conversation, and it allowed her to have the last word, presented exactly as she intended. A masterful final performance. After the turmoil of World War II and her controversial time in Germany, Pola eventually returned to the United States in the late 1940s and became an American citizen in 1951. She didn't immediately rush back into the Hollywood fray. Instead, she opted for a life largely outside the limelight. She eventually settled in San Antonio, Texas, of all places. Can you imagine the exotic European film legend relocating to the heart of Texas? It seems delightfully incongruous. Reports from this period depict a more private figure, though still maintaining her elegance and mystique. She wasn't entirely retired, however. In 1964, she made a surprising and rather charming comeback in the Walt Disney film The Moon Spinners, starring Hayley Mills. Pola played a colorful, eccentric, jewel-hoarding recluse named Madame Habib. It wasn't a demanding role, but it was. Wonderful to see her back on screen, clearly having fun, turban firmly in place. It was a lovely little coda to her main film career. Details about her daily life in San Antonio are scarce, suggesting she valued her privacy in her later years. Did she swap Hollywood gossip for bridge games? Did she develop a taste for Tex-Mex? We can only speculate. Perhaps she enjoyed the relative anonymity, a respite from the constant scrutiny of her earlier life. Maybe she spent her days reading, tending a garden, or, as we imagined earlier, enjoying the company of pets. Picture her perhaps sitting on a Texas porch, sipping iced tea, observing the world with those still piercing eyes, the echoes of applause and camera clicks finally fading into a comfortable silence. But even in retirement, even in Texas, she remained Pola Negri. The self-invention might have slowed down, the performance scaled back, but the essence of the star she had created endured. These key events, the funeral, the memoir, the quiet later years punctuated by a final screen appearance, map the trajectory of a life lived large, a life consciously crafted, a life that refused to be ordinary. Footprints on the Walk of Fame. So when the final credits rolled on Pola Negri's dramatic life, what was left behind? More than just flickering images on celluloid, that's for sure. Her legacy is woven into the very fabric of Hollywood history, a testament to her groundbreaking career and indelible persona. Let's recap her main contributions, the headlines on her permanent Hollywood resume. First and foremost, she was a pioneer. As one of the very first major European stars successfully imported by Hollywood, she smashed open the door for others. Garbo, Dietrich, Bergman, they all followed the path Pola helped blaze, proving that international talent could captivate American audiences and become global icons. She broadened Hollywood's horizons, injecting a dose of continental sophistication into the burgeoning American film industry. She remains an icon of exotic glamour. In an era often dominated by apple-cheeked American sweethearts, Pola offered a thrilling alternative, dark, mysterious, sensual, and fiercely independent. She embodied a different kind of femininity, one that was powerful, alluring, and slightly dangerous. This image resonated deeply, influencing perceptions of beauty and style for decades. She made foreign synonymous with fascinating. She didn't just play femme fatale. She helped define the femme fatale archetype for cinema. Her portrayals of seductive, morally complex women who often led men to ruin became iconic. She established visual and behavioral cues for this character type that filmmakers and actresses would draw upon for generations. Think of almost any cinematic vamp or dangerous dame that followed. Chances are there's a little bit of Pola Negri DNA in there somewhere, and her influence on fashion and style cannot be overstated. The turbans, the kohl-rimmed eyes, the painted toenails, the lavish furs, these weren't just personal quirks. They were trends she ignited. She demonstrated the immense power of a movie star to dictate fashion, using her own body and image as a canvas for expressing glamour, rebellion, and exoticism. She wasn't just wearing costumes. She was creating looks that jumped off the screen and onto the streets. Pola Negri proved that you could come from obscurity, from a small town in occupied Poland, possess a difficult accent, and still claw your way to the very top of the most glamorous, cutthroat industry in the world. She wasn't just handed stardom. She willed it into existence through talent, ambition, and an incredible knack for self-promotion. We never did get to that story about her allegedly throwing a custard tart at a director who annoyed her. Maybe some legends are best left deliciously unconfirmed. Thinking back to our iconic focus points, her mesmerizing performance as the self-assured Empress in Forbidden Paradise, and her unforgettable controversial display at Valentino's funeral, these moments perfectly capture her essence. One the pinnacle of her screen power and self-created regality. The other, a stunning example of her ability to merge real-life drama with performance art. Both remain indelible images in the scrapbook of Hollywood history. Ultimately, Pola's greatest legacy might be the sheer force of her personality and her unwavering commitment to our central theme, the endless self-invention. More than just an actress, she was the author of her own myth. From Barbara Chałpiak to Countess Domska to Pola Negri, Hollywood superstar, she constantly shaped and reshaped her identity, crafting a persona designed to captivate, provoke, and endure. She wrote her own story, complete with triumphs, tragedies, embellishments, and a whole lot of style. Pola Negri wasn't just in the picture, she was the picture, a self-made masterpiece of ambition and allure. When the velvet curtain falls. The final act for Barbara Apollonia Chałpiak, the woman the world knew as Pola Negri, came quietly, far from the Hollywood spotlights she once commanded. She passed away on August 1, 1987, in San Antonio, Texas. Depending on which of her preferred birth years you choose, she was around 90 years old. A long life, certainly, and one packed with more drama and glamour than a dozen ordinary lifetimes. She reportedly died of pneumonia. Though she had also battled a brain tumor in her later years, the fiery comet that had blazed across continents finally came to rest. How is Pola Negri remembered today? Primarily as a towering figure of the silent film era. She stands alongside names like Chaplin, Pickford, Fairbanks, and Swanson as one of the true giants who shaped early cinema. She's remembered as Hollywood's first major European import, the exotic enchantress who brought a new kind of sensuality and sophistication to the American screen. Her image, the kohl-rimmed eyes, the turban, the dramatic poses, remains instantly recognizable to film buffs. She's celebrated for her powerful, emotive, silent performances and acknowledged for her influence on fashion and the femme fatale archetype. Of course, she's also remembered for the drama, the temper, the scandals, the high-profile affairs, and especially the Valentino funeral. Her life story is as compelling as any of her film roles, a whirlwind of ambition, passion, resilience, and controversy. She was complex, contradictory, and utterly unforgettable, a true diva in every sense of the word. In recognition of her contributions to the motion picture industry, Pola Negri has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, located at 6933 Hollywood Boulevard. It's a permanent marker of her status as cinematic royalty. While perhaps not as universally known today as some of her contemporaries, her films are periodically revived at festivals, studied in film history courses, and available for new generations to discover online. Modern audiences can still experience the magnetic pull of her performances, the sheer force of personality that transcended the limitations of silent film. So, what's the final takeaway from the incredible saga of Pola Negri? Maybe it's that true star power is about more than just talent. It's about creating an aura, a mystique, a legend that lasts. Pola did that like few others. She embraced the spotlight, courted controversy, and lived her life unapologetically large. Want to experience the allure of Pola Negri for yourself? You absolutely should. Check out clips from her silent films, especially the mesmerizing Forbidden. Paradise, often available on platforms like YouTube or archive sites. We'll drop some links in the description below. What do you think? Was Pola Negri a misunderstood genius, a master self-promoter, or the ultimate drama queen? We want to hear your thoughts. Sound off in the comment section. Let the debate begin. And if you love these deep dives into Hollywood's hidden histories and forgotten legends, you know what to do. Smash that like button. Subscribe to Hollywood Unveiled for more stories that pull back the curtain. And hey, maybe consider checking out our Patreon. Your support helps us keep digging up the Tinseltown dirt, metaphorically speaking, of course. Even a small contribution helps us keep the lights on and the projectors running as we continue to unveil the truth behind the legends. Pola Negri, she wasn't just an actress who played queens and vamps. She embodied the very essence of cinematic drama itself. From the poverty of Poland to the palaces of Hollywood, she engaged in a relentless act of self-creation, building an image as powerful and enduring as any fortress. Her life, like her iconic role in Forbidden Paradise, was a performance of power, passion, and unwavering self-belief. Pola Negri didn't just act in movies. She was the movie, a thrilling, ambitious, never-boring epic. The final curtain may have fallen, but the incandescent glow of her star power lingers on.